You haven't had a chance to read the minutes, go ahead and do that. Looking for a motion once that's done.
I know how to do that.
Yeah, I know you do. I was with you a number of times. At least it seems. Motion anywhere?
I move we accept the minutes as written.
For a second? All right. Comments, questions, changes? And I have one. What I'd like to have everybody take a look at is the very last paragraph. And we're referring to, I think, the best possible location that we spent some time with the driveway that was heading toward the water. And it seems to me that it was pretty clear in our minds after the phone call that he was going to cut back a 10-foot piece of that concrete. Now, I see here that it's talking about installing a buffer, but to me it's not clear that that actually is going to take place, cutting back the 10 feet of that concrete driveway. Because there is a buffer beyond that also. So the total buffer is going to be more than the 10. Okay, so that's good for you.
And also the 700, I'm pretty sure was changed to 800 resultantly. 700 was what he agreed upon previously, and then once we expanded to the, removing the 10 by 10 foot of the
So that
ramp, at least, he went up to 800.
So do you want to say, because it's 700 plus the 10 square feet?
Plus the 100 square feet, because it's 10 by 10.
Right, so did you, I mean, it was 700 and then the 10 by 10. So if I say, how do you want to say it?
But he was already in the 20% though, right? Because he'd already done
The 700 made it to 20%.
okay.
But he agreed to do that 10 by 10, which makes it 800. But I wasn't sure how to put that in that without making it look like it's going to be 800 plus the 10 by 10.
Well, maybe you can put it in when you change the first part about taking out the 10 feet of the concrete and revegetating, on top of the 700 that he agreed to, however you want to phrase that. Maybe you can put it together in that one sentence to make sure that the revegetation and the taken out is going to be in
I'll
there.
bring it back next week for you to look at.
Okay.
Well, yeah, there's 3 paragraphs there under that one subject. I think the second paragraph's fine to leave the 700, and then the third paragraph, we would
I could say
change
800
to
square
800 in the
feet.
second paragraph.
Okay, say 800 square feet, which includes the 10 square feet at the bowl ramp.
Correct. Yeah, the first paragraph kind of breaks it down into the 2 areas, so to speak, and then the second is more conclusive.
But that sounds like it works. That sounds like it works, so.
I hope so. We'll look at it again.
Any other comments, questions? Then all in favor of the amended minutes? Good time? Okay, so minutes are good, we'll again take a peek at it, but we'll. And since Moose Pond sand and gravel conditional paper is taken care of, with all the signatures that are on there, so now you're all set with that, that's just going to be that. And those changes that we were looking for were included in the new one.
So you guys signed it
Yes.
before I came in?
Yes. Yeah.
I'll just look at it at the end of the meeting. maybe.
Okay, absolutely.
Cool.
Next up, we might as well jump to the wedding venue. And there's a sheet in your packet that is really notes that I kind of put together after we spent some time there last week. And like I say, right or wrong, you know, they're not really minutes, it's just me going back that night and writing down things that I remembered. There may be other things that we missed, or that I missed, there may be things in here that you're not quite sure about. So at this point in time anyway, let me throw it out there, questions, comments for these guys? Go to it.
Have you determined a name? Because really, the permit me to give you a name. It's fine as an.
We have not determined the name.
That's fine, that's fine.
It looks like a wedding name.
Good enough.
Hoping to find something that fits with the town and, you know, has some historical value if you know, we look at whatnot, so.
Sure, sure. After, I don't know if you had a chance to look at these notes, was there anything in there that jumped out at you that didn't seem, that as you remembered?
Did you get a copy?
Yeah,
Yes,
we
yeah.
get a copy, okay. Yeah, no, I feel it covers what we did, yeah.
In your mind, everything is in, all the paperwork is in, all of the, everything is complete? So then I think, as simple as it may be, if there's not a lot of questions or concerns at this point, then maybe we just simply set a public hearing. That might be the next step.
I did have a couple of
Go
questions.
to it.
Just when I took these three maps, this one I found particularly interesting here. Is this to scale approximately?
Yeah, so I used Google SketchUp and drew things to scale, so, you know, on the little piece that you have there, it is basically to scale.
So what I did was I kind of took this map and then I compared it with this map and this map. And I'm just trying to figure out exactly how far maybe this picture would work better, how far this corner of the parking lot is from, well, I guess maybe this,
From the wetland.
from this particular area here, because when you compare the two maps, it looks like it could be somewhat close to it, especially on this one.
Yeah, so I think when,
But you didn't have the building envelopes or anything laid out there with that, did you?
no.
Just the wetland?
Yeah, just the wetland there.
Yeah.
And so on the wetland delineation, the initial one, that back corner should technically be that back corner, what you see in the, of the parking lot area. So, because that's what I gave to the wetland people to say, hey, here's what I've drawn to scale so far. We can go take a first stab at it anyway. So I believe that it does cross the corner the way we have it
Oh,
drawn
it's just
today.
like, so you were saying this corner here approximately represents the corner of the parking lot?
That's my
It
thought,
could
yeah.
potentially, so when we're
Yeah.
speaking with the delineator, that's why we're essentially saying, when we go, we'll need his further approval, when we actually say,
Thank you, sir.
set in stone, like this is where we're building everything.
Right.
So of course, we'll shift it over or back, however we need to, so we won't be.
Making that? Wow.
We did it on slow-mo.
Anything else that catches your attention?
But Ken, I was just asking them how close this back corner of their parking area is gonna be to.
That wetlands delineation.
Just right here, this wetland spot right here. And it seems like it's gonna be fairly close.
Yeah, well, we got the delineation the same day that we met with you the first time, so we had already, you know.
Right, you'd
put
already
everything out,
plotted
so
this
we-
one out.
Right.
Yeah, so.
That's why I was figuring maybe as one of the conditions that we come up with, that we come up with a distance between this corner of the parking area
Sure.
and this wetland, and
Yeah.
then, you know, confirm it with Ken somehow afterwards you're underway there.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was just one thing I saw.
Yeah.
The other thing,
You want to set that as a condition at this point in time?
I can just do it when we go through the conditions, I guess, because we're not sure the exact distance we're looking for right now either. I mean, I could throw a distance out there, but
No, that's fine. I mean, you have it in your head, you're not.
I'm not gonna forget it.
Absolutely.
You're thinking of like a 25-foot buffer?
Well, something, I mean, that's a good start. I mean, because it's 110 parking spaces of gravel,
And it all depends which way it's sloping.
and it's all right on top of the Aquifer Protection District. I mean, I don't know, I wanna see some sort of buffer there and just some sort of affirmatory it's gonna be there. Of course, we didn't walk back there, but we also didn't have the building lot flagged out, so it wouldn't have been that useful anyway.
Right, we could have taken you out to, the corner was flagged because the delineator went out and walked essentially like 5 acres, so he didn't do the
Yeah.
entirety of the property.
Right.
So the corner that we are talking about right now is flagged, but
Mhm.
exactly where the building is going is not.
Yeah, okay.
But definitely open to, you know, moving it over to buffer
Right.
away from there. I think we have plenty of space to shift it that direction,
Right.
so.
Clip the corner around it, so.
Right,
Yeah,
yeah,
I think we can be creative.
Once we start with the construction project, we'll be working with a stormwater mitigation
Yeah.
plan on everything coming off the roofs, the parking lots,
Yep.
detention ponds or whatever anyways.
And these areas here, in between the spaces, are planned to be vegetated, was that the, or all gravel, the whole thing's gravel?
So the parking lot is going to be gravel.
Yeah, which is just these aisles, or is it, this is the drive lane?
Yeah,
It's just
exactly.
gravel and
Yeah.
that's the parking areas?
Yeah.
So there's no, say, you know, buffer between the space, like say in between the 2 rows of spaces, you don't have a 10 feet of bushes or anything?
Not as
in
fun
the-
today, but if
okay.
that's something that, you know, you think would be really valuable, I think we're open to it. You know, I had drawn it, I think, in the ordinance, you're looking for 26 feet in between, driveways for parking areas specifically. I think it's a little different than the actual regular
Right.
driveway, but, so that's kind of where I came up with that spacing.
And then, one thing I was thinking about when we were walking in there, looking at that culvert is, you guys are probably gonna end up replacing that culvert when you expand the
We'll
road.
have to extend it.
Yeah.
And, I was just thinking maybe that I'd ask you to consider like an open bottom culvert, like a cement form that would allow, it would be like a wider area under the road, because that's kind of a weird area. I can't imagine that culvert actually works that well. Because the whole area is kind of, the water's kind of saturating through the whole area. It's not like a flowage that just goes
Right.
through.
Right, yeah.
So if you had a wider space into there, that would also allow creatures to go back and forth. You know, it would just be like the natural terrain underneath. I don't know how wide, you wouldn't need a very wide one, I would think.
Yeah, definitely.
It was in that wildlife action plan that we were looking at. I don't know when that was, 6, 8 months ago, the wildlife management. Those are the 2 biggest things that I kind of,
Richard, when you were talking to us about how this was going to come together in terms of manpower, one father-in-law was a carpenter and another was an excavator, is that right?
Yeah, so my dad has been a general contractor for a while, as a carpenter, framer, etc. Her dad is a barn restorer, so that's where it helps out. We have, we're able to do our own septic systems, we do that at our own personal home. Uncle's a plumber, or uncle's an electrician, so you know, it's what starts to make some of this
More
feasible
feasible.
anyway, you know?
Yeah.
The question arises because of what we saw, what Gavin was briefly describing there, in terms of stormwater management. I would hope you've got a realistic number on behalf of this thing being a go from somebody who knew cost estimating road review. 'Cause that's quite a project.
Right.
The road itself.
And I think a lot of our hope is that the gravel that's there available is suitable to at least build the majority of the road, and we do have the equipment owned to do much of the work ourselves.
We understand it's a large undertaking.
Yes,
No,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Our only purview in this is to make sure that the stormwater is done adequately, but there is the concern of, well, not really financial capability. We don't look at that on these kind of projects, but
Yes, on the subdivision.
on a subdivision. So, I'm glad you got somebody steering you.
Anybody else? So let's set a date. What's good for everybody, for the public hearing. We need 2 meetings basically, right, for you to get everything? Isn't that how we always go through this?
To get them in the paper.
First meeting in September, the 7th.
Okay. How's that work with you guys?
So we will be away for a week on the 7th.
Thursday wedding?
It's Thursday through Sunday.
Yeah.
I'm in the wedding, so I can't
Yeah.
not go.
Do you want it the, so it would be the 21st instead?
If that's the earliest time that is available other than the 7th.
Yep.
We can't get it into August. We can't get it for the,
No, I wouldn't think so.
I think it's too big a project to change.
alright.
It's your call.
All right, how about everybody else? We good for the public hearing on the second meeting in September?
Yeah,
All right, good.
what's the date on it?
21st.
First. All righty. Anything else?
So that would be the first of 2. Is that what you said?
No, only one.
Oh.
Only one.
So, yeah, I guess just a couple of questions. So is it held here, is it over in the other building over there?
Should be here.
Should be here, okay. And in terms of approval thoughts, so we're just working through extensions with the seller currently, so I just wanna make sure we give a realistic idea of when we can expect kind of a yay or a nay, you know? So do you anticipate it would be soon after? I think there's something in the ordinance about 75 days that you're given once we hand in the application and whatnot, so is it traditional, you think, after the hearing that you'll know? Is it gonna be, the next meeting that comes after that?
I mean, typically, in a lot of them, we then just can handle it in the meeting. What we don't know is what we're gonna get with people
Sure.
coming from
Yeah.
the public.
Right.
Absolutely.
And that, that could be some kind of a trigger. I mean, it's possible, that we could be dealing with it that night.
We'll definitely discuss it that night after the hearing, and if
We're just
it
looking
if it
at-
wasn't that night, it would probably be 2 weeks from that night.
Okay, that's perfect.
That's-
That's exactly
That's what I
kind of
would
what.
think.
We're just trying to look at the extension date for the current owner.
Sure.
And then just a quick one, I guess, on the process, is it presentation? Is it that people are able to come and look at this beforehand?
Yeah, it would give you the opportunity to give them a spiel, depending on, again, who's here. It's gonna be probably abutters, and perhaps some of the abutters that were here when we had the public hearing for the original division of the land. So, you're welcome to do that, and then we're gonna ask them for questions. And sometimes we get them, sometimes we don't.
All right, that sounds good.
A useful kind of set of criterion that you might have to be considering answering is the standards applicable to conditional uses. If you, in your mind, kind of work through those and have what we call findings of fact that enable us to check those off as not being adhered to, we're all set. So those are your basic.
If you like, I can email you, or are they in the application, the standards, they may be in the application.
No, yeah, they're in the
Right here.
application, and then they're followed by
Our
PowerPoint.
concerns, yeah.
Yep, so you guys are aware of
Absolutely.
Somebody mentioned, I don't know if it was Ken, there was a history one spring recently of some water exiting that driveway or something?
During the timber harvest, there was some issues
Oh,
out there.
okay. But there hasn't been any since.
No.
Anybody else? How about you guys, you good?
Just so the abutters, I pulled an initial list. The parcel's since been split, so I think it might shrink a little bit. Do you want me just to work with you two?
Actually, I can just pull it up on our maps and go from that, because it does the addressing and everything for me.
Yeah, no, I used the
Yes,
same
you did,
thing.
okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
so I didn't know if they had split the parcels yet, because, you know, the original parcel, the 3 is a little bit bigger, so.
I don't think that we have any notification that any of the names have changed on that, so it would probably all go to Van Hotel. Is that what you're saying?
I guess I'm trying to say, so like part of the parcel that this was broken off from and subdivided is, let's say, on 109 itself, right?
Right.
But our piece that we're working on isn't part of that anymore, so when you do the, hey, I'm looking for 500 feet around, you know, it just selects more people and whatnot.
Right, because you're talking now a smaller piece of property as
Right.
opposed to the whole big thing before.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it would be along this one.
Yeah, so I've gone through and kind of used the mapping tool to try and say who's, you know, within that distance based on the new parcel, so if you want, you and I can work together on that and, okay. All right?
Good. All right, good to go?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you, well, see you in September.
Sounds good. Oh gosh, that's
I
far.
know. That's
far.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next, Nancy is not here. Do you know anything going on about that, or we just kind of set up a public hearing?
I think the application's complete, we can set it up at the same night.
We can. Do you think that would be a problem for her?
We'll send her a memo tomorrow, and if
Yeah.
we can change it, and push it back 2 more weeks.
Could we possibly do it earlier and not have two on the same night? In your mind?
That would be for the
It should be the
7th?
7th of September?
Is there enough days?
Yes.
The boss says it's a go.
All right, so we'll set that public hearing then for the 7th, first meeting of the month.
When's Labor Day?
4th, I
Okay.
believe.
A quick question on that one, Ken. Talking with Nancy, has she covered the septic provisions that would be required with the 25 people living in the house?
They're going to, she wants to use the house
Right,
for sanitary provisions, or the camp.
but is that gonna float?
If we call it a camp, it works under the building code, because it's just an outbuilding to the camp. The camp has, we talked about taking a walk over there the other day, and we probably should have. It's actually got stalls and bathrooms in it.
So it's kind of like a dormitory.
Correct. Yeah.
But does their tank capacity cover what they're intending to do?
I'd have to look at the count they have on that, but I would imagine because it's vacant. I don't want to say 90% of the time, but I know it's vacant well over 75.
Okay, that was the only question that came up in my mind.
Yeah, that's been a question since day one.
I mean, there are some notes from that site walk too that you would also have in your packet. I'm not sure if anybody actually has questions. I'm not sure we can handle the answers to the questions, but Nancy's not here. But in case there are questions, we could add to those notes so that when she does come, perhaps we can get answers then.
So the public hearing date is,
September 7th. Yeah. Tentative. And so, Tom, you're concerned about,
adequate septic provisions for the new artistes.
yeah, Anybody else have anything that they would be asking tonight if she was here? All right, moving on. Steve's Timber Harvest. I thought we were done. So did I. Come on up.
So, in working with Ken since the last meeting and since town meeting, I've gotten back into a few timber harvests that have been working around resource protection zones that have had us back into the ordinance again to realize, as best as he and I can understand, that we rescinded all of the town-based ordinances as far as what you can cut where. What we did not do though, unfortunately, and I think it's as much an oversight or a typo style scenario, is that we left the heading of our article the same, which indicates timber harvesting in sort of resource protection and shoreland zones, and then we swapped out all of the information from the statewide standards to put into that article. What we didn't do is we still left that title saying operations of timber harvesting within shoreland zones, which has got Ken and I both, and again, please correct me if I'm misstating somehow, Ken, but it's got us wondering if we're looking at this, just exactly how or whether or not that title should have been changed, obviously, as well. We have rescinded all of the ordinances that said, cut this here, cut that there, which brings us into compliance with statewide standards. What we didn't do was change the article heading. So again, I'm calling that kind of a typo, but if it's somehow different, please let me know. But that kind of almost is saying again that we have gotten some other ordinances that are infringing upon statewide standards by having that title of the article still stay the same. Enough to keep us out of statewide standards with regard to what the state of Maine would have us do. That combined with the chart that we have where it says permitted uses versus conditional use permits, R4, that chart right there also could be amended in order to make things a little clearer as well. I think Ken and I have a pretty good idea what we're shooting for, and I think we all had an idea of what we were shooting for when we brought about that article to be proposed at the town meeting. But again, what we didn't do was actually change the title of that article. So if that's all it is, I think it's pretty much a clerical scenario, but Ken, I'll pass the ball to you and hopefully you can.
549.
Yeah, I don't have it, I mean, I have it in front of me, but I've got it in 5 different. So for example, what we have, just in layman's terms, is we still are infringing upon statewide standard timber harvesting ordinances with the town definition of what resource protection is. And since we have differing ordinances on what can be built, what can be created, leach fields, houses, those sorts of building projects, we are trying to farther separate the idea that even if the town has more specific restrictions for what a resource protection zone is called with regard to septics, with regard to leach fields, with regard to housing, that it doesn't infringe upon statewide standards on timber harvesting.
Remember where that was, Steve?
It's on page 72, I believe, of the new books. I don't
Yeah, and I don't have the new book is my problem, so
5.19.
So the difference is, the state starts their resource protection at 10 acres of true wetlands. The ducks are swimming around in the pond. Acton starts at 2 acres of forested wetlands. That's just some poor soils with some vegetation in it. If we were to go to statewide standards, all these resource protection areas that are not 250, that are not state regulated, you would be able to basically clear cut not only the buffer, but the wetlands as well. Could be unregulated. If we were to statewide standards, only the active and the local resource protection areas. And I know we really didn't talk about that during the process. We talked a lot about getting rid of the prescriptive local stuff of the boom skidder and the cable skidder stuff, we got rid of all that and just left the standards in there.
Well, we weren't looking at how it was done, we were more looking about the where it was done.
Correct.
So there, what is the minimum protections that would be followed if we made this correction?
So I would say if this wetland area, which is only a wetland in Acton, if he had the same parcel in Lebanon, Newfield, Shapley, you could clear cut it. It
So
would
that-
only be the state regulated resource protection map that we had back in 2009 that would have the 40% you stay out of the resource. Does that sound accurate?
Reasonably alarmist, but yeah.
I mean, to me, it doesn't even sound like we're talking about apples and apples with what Steve's saying and what you're saying. Steve's saying basically clerical, and I don't hear clerical.
Yeah, no, I'm not either. So I want to make sure that we're on the same page.
Oh, it is. We change a couple of things in this ordinance and we can now, not we, but the timber harvesting community could cut what is protected today in clear cut. It would
But the
be-
point, well, I guess what I want to make sure that we understand though, is that when the articles were brought about at town meeting, statewide standards were explained, statewide standards were talked about. We went over issues like what Tom has spoken about and showed what each of the protection zones of all of the different sections of wetlands of different types have. We did bring that in at town meeting. It's there. That's that. So currently, the only thing to stop it, and this is where the difference between Ken and my statement comes to be, is that we are not by statewide standards because of that clerical error of not changing the title of the article. What Ken's talking about right now is, I want to say, re-arguing the point of whether or not we should or should not have done such a thing. So I can still get into the idea and what Tom is talking about. Again, we have rehashed all that. We've gone in and said, here's what a wetland is, here's what its buffers are, here's what the state has you can do and what we can't do. That was brought in. And it was meant to be brought in. The question now is,
Would you clarify one thing for us, if you can? If we were to adopt, and I'm on page 72 here, looking at 5.19.
I don't have the new book, but, I mean, I've got the 20. So what's the page now?
72. Does that have it? Yeah, I can share this.
I don't think we changed any of the verbiage. It should be the same verbiage in the old ordinance.
Right, no, everything, would- okay, so what are you looking at, Tom?
It should be the same.
If we were to change the wording in the header to the following standards shall govern timber harvesting within the state designated shoreland and resource
No,
protection areas.
because the state does not designate what shoreland zone is. They say within 250 feet of a wetland greater than 10 acres. The whole concept behind this is if the town continues to manipulate and change what it calls a shoreland zone for other reasons, every time you mention shoreland zone, it's bringing timber harvesting back into the problem. It's bringing it back in. So if every time the town, if timber harvesting, if you were to say follow state, the following standards shall govern timber harvesting, period, then that's what the statewide standards would be. But every time you say, or imply or refer back to shoreland zone, then it's the glossary of what the town dictates as shoreland zone and RP is brought back into it, which is exactly what we did. That's what I'm trying to correct, because we had the intention of having statewide standards.
But even if you use the phrase within the state designated,
They do not designate what within statewide standards 5.19.1 on.
yeah,
Nowhere in there will you see anything that says shoreline zone or resource protection. They have defined it by what it is, by its definition, by its footages, by its prescription. You keep coming back to the name of it, and I'm just saying, every time the town talks about shoreline zone and RP with regard to something completely different,
There's
It
no-
brings it back
There's
in.
no difference, dichotomy, between the state designation of shoreline district and RP district with, those are not in conflict, I don't think. with
Yes, they are,
anything in
very much so.
In timber harvesting.
You are calling everything with 2 acres or greater
No, no,
as
no, no.
acquiring a, am I misunderstanding the question?
Yeah, because the phrase, if we were to interject it, following standards shall govern timber harvesting within the state designated shoreland and resource protection areas, which would throw you back to shoreland has a designated width of 250 feet from great ponds. And
Where
that's
does it say shoreline specifically?
in the title. in the
No,
header.
no, no, go and show me within the text
The-
where it
might
says
be
that
in
that
timber harvesting,
definition, that that's the definition of shoreline zone. is what I'm asking.
It probably isn't in timber harvesting, it's probably in our glossary of terms.
Well, exactly, that's what I'm saying though, is if you are using, a shoreline zone is defined as an area around, for example, a 2-acre wetland is a 75-foot buffer around a shoreline zone, then would that?
That would be a resource protection zone.
That would,
Well, resource or shoreline, I'm using the two almost interchangeably, timber harvesting.
Right, well, that's a difficulty. What are you looking
but
at?
when you say state designated, you're referring back to the state definition, which is 250 feet from the state ponds.
I would agree with you, but within the statewide standards, as it's referred to later in the article, it never says a shoreline zone or an RP district is 250 feet. It says within an area.
Right, well, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I think if it says within an area 250 feet from the upper wetland edge, it never calls that a resource protection zone. So I'm just saying, if we have a line drawn, figurative line, that says what the town calls an RP for building, what the town calls an RP for other type of projects, is independent of this timber harvest zone. You're calling it a name, and I'm just saying the state has not called it that name, and it doesn't need to have a name because it gives it by the definition of its buffers and sizes, right there. What does adding that name actually get you?
It throws you back to this glossary of terms, which is, I don't know if I have it with me.
But you don't need the glossary of terms if it has its definition within the ordinance
Well,
already.
it's not within the timber harvesting ordinance, is it?
You just said that it was. 250 feet off from upper wetland edge, they just
Yeah,
don't call
and
it.
I'm deriving that definition from page 32 of our ordinance, which basically states the state definition of shoreline zone.
Are you in the golden one?
Yes, and the RP would be straightened out by the phrase state designated. You
Well,
see what I'm
if,
driving?
okay, Tom, if,
Not completely, right.
well, I see what you're calling shoreline zone, and if that definition were to hold true, I would say yes. But if the whole reason behind why we're here talking about this now is because there has been a gray area stuck in the middle of those two, then call it by its definition of what it is, and don't allow the two to mingle by using that phrase in the top of the terminology for the article. I
Well,
agree with you, it's fine if you call it that, and I would have called it that had not been asked, but the state timber harvest ordinances never actually refers to it as a shoreland or an RP. So if the state doesn't refer to it as that, then just go by the definition within the timber harvesting ordinances of the state, which is 5.19.1 on. You don't need to have the title of it within shoreline zone up there. We don't want it to change. We don't want it ever to be infringed upon by any other town ordinances that may change for other actions, other processes.
Do these standards apply everywhere outside of the shoreline zone?
The only thing that they have referred to is within that, and again, I'm gonna only stop you for using that name, but yes, the shoreline zone is 250 feet. I just want to try to make sure that we all see the difference, that if you wanna call it 250 feet from upper wetland edge of a wetland 10 acres or greater, then do so. But every time you and I tripped over the verbiage of it, it was because the article was called in shoreland zone, and we have in our ordinances that a wetland of 2 acres or greater have amended and brought in a wetland buffer that is called in other places in our ordinance a shoreland zone buffer.
Or resource protection.
Or a resource protection buffer. So I'm just trying to simply draw a line that says timber harvesting at a higher level is separate from what the town calls shoreland zone or RP, that's all.
So if the board would consider that, then you could clear cut this area, but you couldn't build a doghouse in it, because there's no building in it. So that's really, and that's why I was just being blunt with it, so you understand what we're talking about, and either you say, no, this is an area that's been, the board has tried to protect for years, or, and realistically, it wouldn't be a clear cut, but
Well, what you still have is you still have timber harvest ordinances that are not statewide standards, because those are for that inside of 250 area. You still have the Maine Forest Practices Act, which is, if it is harvested in a certain way, you have to go for a clear cutting permit, you have to have a regeneration standard, you have to have inspections for certain numbers of trees left per acre, you have to have a certain amount of basal area left. I don't want you to, be Chicken Little and saying, next thing you know, everybody's gonna go out and clear cut right across all these wetlands. We still have all of the state timber harvest ordinances, but these statewide standards, which we brought in, only cover, and again, I'm not gonna use the word shoreland or RP, area out inside of 250 of those areas, or inside of a 75-foot buffered brook, as dictated by state guidelines. And everything outside of that, which is upper non-wetland areas, still have timber harvest state standards attached to them.
Can you describe for us what would be allowable under the Maine State Forest Practices Act for cutting in and around a 5-acre wetland? Just so we have something to go by here.
Again, what is the harvesting that you're asking about, though? Are you saying, hey, someone wants to clear cut across it, or?
the client wants his most dollar he can get off his land because he's going to sell the land, and it's a forested wetland.
The minimum that is allowed, the maximum harvest, the minimum left is 40 square feet of basal area per acre, which again, this is all forestry terms, so do with it what you will. It's 40 square feet of basal area and/or 450 stems of regenerated trees already per acre there. So again, I can get into all of this, but are you gonna, please don't take this the wrong way, but I don't want to muddy the idea about renegotiating what we did bring in with what this is implying.
I just want to get some sense of what would be allowable if we made a delineation between, it's primarily the resource protection areas as defined by the town of Acton versus the resource protection areas as defined by the state in the Timber Harvesting Practices Act in usage.
The town RP goes to wetlands down to 2 acres,
Right,
correct?
right.
So what I'm saying to you is, are you having me re-argue what we already just passed at the town meeting?
No, I just want to know what,
We don't want to get too crazy here, let's just, because all we did was try to straighten out the verbiage.
Right.
And honestly, I didn't vote for it with the idea that we were going to be giving up town protection of the RP in terms of timber harvesting. So this is a conversation we're going to have to continue at another night for sure. Because, I don't know, Ken is just trying to help the board understand.
Worst case.
Yeah, what the result
No, and I follow.
is.
And I'm here as a town employee doing these things, so I'm just saying.
Yeah, but you're advocating to remove any sort of town,
Well, one of the big
Well,
problems
with all due
now,
respect, the town already did that.
Well, no, the thing is that the planning board, when we talked about it, and that's not what we did. We removed verbiage that was unnecessary in the ordinance to make it shorter, more organized, and easier to use.
descriptive methods that were not in the
That
state
were
standards.
outdated, and we
Yeah.
didn't want those in there. But I I personally don't feel like the board voted to remove, any sort of purview over the resource protection districts in terms of timber harvesting. So.
Well, again, my only point to that is that it's what the back and forth is what the town is calling resource protection or shoreline versus what the state is calling resource protection. We have those ordinances in there with statewide standards right now, and we have the Maine Forest Practices Act, which covers everything else. You don't have unregulated timber harvesting anywhere within the state of Maine, period. So if the real question you're asking is, should we or should not we have given up purview to anything that is in a wetland under 10 acres, then that's going back to what we had discussed at the meeting before this article was proposed.
Well, absolutely.
So-
I'm not asking anything. I'm letting you know how I feel about the
Yeah.
thing. And we're gonna, obviously, it's gonna take a little bit of time. We're not gonna figure it out tonight.
That being said, if we were all in agreement with what Steve is advocating, the process is, if I'm not mistaken, we still have to go to a town meeting to correct verbiage,
Yeah.
even if that's all it is. Not that I'm saying that that's what it is,
Right,
I'm not,
right.
but I mean, so making a decision in the near future, it's gonna take some time, just because of that. We just have to be ready for whatever that next town meeting might be.
Well, I think the board just thinks about it a little bit to see if they want to move forward with this, to give Mr. Bodkin some direction, or it's a no. No, we're rarely concerned about this, we had no intention of it, or realistically, we don't see it as a big deal, let's move forward and draft some. I think it's fairly easy to change a couple of words in this heading and a couple of things in the land use chart, and we'd be all set. The big problem we have is when a logging company wants to do a cut, they go to the state website, there's no resource protection on it, they go and cut it. We get the notification about 6 weeks later, the cut's already been done for a month, and if there's resource protection out there, town resource protection, it's been cut and trampled.
Do you, Steve?
Or it has the possibility, again, I'm gonna play a little bit of devil's advocate, now, come on.
Has
I
the
mean,
possibility that, but if you don't know it's
You have
there.
no purview on it at that point, yes. I
Correct,
agree.
if you don't know it's, if the logging operation doesn't know it's there, they're gonna treat it just like it was not resource protection.
I mean, look, I can bring about specific instances, and that's fine, but we are talking more of a theory, well, we're talking about this in theory. Some of the projects that I've been working on lately have got areas where the area that's in question that the town has called based upon its mapping is something that you will stand on, you will not have your feet wet, the soils are completely dry at this time of year, and completely doing the work on there will not do anything barely even to touch the surface below 2 inches on the surface of the ground, as the maps are currently within the town now. One of the projects I've worked on had it's a BS soil, which is a seasonally wet soil that may have, moss or something like that on it for a few months out of the year. It is completely forested. Barely scratched the surface if done with best management practices, which is part of the state timber harvest standards. Again, this town has all recourse it needs for any streamline integrity, any wetland soils that are moving, meaning like eroding. None of that is off base for anything with regard to town purview on any timber harvest, regardless of whether it's a wetland or not. You still have that ordinance. But on a couple of these jobs, we have sections that are literally 2,000 feet above anything, meaning like upstream, that I could walk you across, and you would have no idea that the town mapping would have that as being, a 2 month out of the year, you would get your boot muddy. And that in and of itself is requiring not only restrictions within that spot on the map, but 250 feet outside of that area up onto upper wetland dry areas from there. So this is getting into me bringing about, this is the way it's happening on the face of the earth in practice. But that's why the definition is important as to whether you're calling it town or whether you're, that town definition, or whether you're calling it state ordinance, 250 from upper wetland edge. So the mapping is really where the rubber meets the road. And again, to me, if the best management practices are followed, and there are no erosion control issues whatsoever, which still falls under the purview of the planning board and of Ken, that's where statewide standards kick in, and timber harvest ordinances for the state. And the town is really extending a long way upstream and towards smaller, smaller wetlands, which is what, as I understood it, we went over at the last planning board meeting before the town meeting to draft that, so.
Any other comments?
If we don't change it, then we're not in compliance with state standards.
Or we have to do something regardless between now and the next time there's a meeting?
No, we don't have to be in compliance with state standards. We just don't get any help from the state.
We should.
The state really encourages us to be in compliance with the state standards.
Yeah. We went all through them.
So at first I was thinking, well, the only difference is 40%. You can cut 40% in the buffer now versus 100, but it's the whole resource itself too. So I was thinking originally it was just a buffer, but it would be not so, I say resource, but I've seen several places where I couldn't tell that was wetlands. There's really not a lot of vegetation that jumps out. There are definitely no ducks swimming around. There's no water. There's no cat nine tails. It's just poor soil, mapped that way.
It's completely forested,
Completely forested.
and again, probably for, 5 months out of the year.
Most of the ones we see,
You won't even
yeah.
get your boots wet.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not proclaiming that like, hey, geez, we ought to be able to just, run roughshod over these. But again, if you look at the map and you really start to see what happens with those definitions in practice, you're starting to encumber 250 feet up off of things that are pretty exorbitant.
Or 50 feet, depends on the size of the,
Right, it depends on the size, right.
Yeah.
But again, you have some that are, if you had a 2-acre wetland, which is completely independent of something else, then it would have the smaller buffer. But in a lot of cases, like those jobs that we looked at, Ken, on the mapping program, the definition of the wetland extended thousands of feet up in from where the state definition of the wetland even ended.
yeah.
We do get a lot of complaints about the map, and usually we just have the landowner get up there, and if he doesn't like the map, he's gotta have it surveyed and get a wetland delineator in there, and honestly, most of the times, but as far as I remember from what Ken's told me, that the town maps are actually fairly accurate.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
But again, they're accurate by,
It's a site-by-site
they're accurate by the
basis.
definition, yes, but my point is that if the face of,
Oh, good.
If
So
I'm saying-
we want the maps to be accurate.
No, I agree, I'm just saying, for
Perfect.
example, if
Good.
the mapping, if what is on the face of the earth always takes precedent over the map, then walk out there and show me that that's what it is. So if a professional forester or a wetland person is out there walking around and 3 of them are debating back and forth on whether there's even a drop of water out there, then I'm just saying we're cutting a very fine line on believing the map over believing what's happening on the face of the earth. That's all.
It's the trouble with the map, you know.
Go ahead, John.
I just wanted to see if my initial take on this holds any water. If we were to try and achieve your goal, as I'm understanding it, Stephen, as I initially suggested, wouldn't in the title of this, under 5.19, following standards shall govern timber harvesting within the state designated shoreline and resource protection areas. Would that not take care of the issue? In other words, the town designated resource protection areas would not be included. And that's your...
If that were actually true, then yes, but that's not what I'm hearing out of other people on the board, that it's a function of...
I'm just trying to throw this out as some something we can all maybe get a toehold in. It might not be what we eventually end up with. The thought included with it is what you're trying to achieve, am I correct? In other words, we don't want any of Acton's RP areas under 10 acres to be, to have any impact regarding their, say the constraints against building development. We don't want those carried over into timber harvesting.
Correct, that's my goal, to separate timber harvesting from other more disturbing, stumping, earth moving
Yeah.
sorts of practices, yeah.
On chapter 2 of this discussion, if you could enable us to understand what would be the protections left after that change was made to get everything in conformance with state of Maine language and definitions. What would be left of any sensibility behind the Acton protections in place now for wetlands smaller than 10 acres? Could they indeed be totally cleanly harvested if that was part of the client's management?
Forgive me, but you lost me about halfway through that. I'm understanding what you're saying, but if the whole discrepancy is in talking about whether we will or will not have town oversight on under 10 acres, then I'm confused as to what you're asking.
I'm asking if we clean this up and make sure to the reader that the only constraints against timber harvesting in the shoreline and resource protection areas is derived from those definitions that the state uses to define those two areas. I'm having some difficulty getting my mind around what would be left of the sensibility of Acton's protections of smaller wetlands as it stands now. You've indicated you would have a lot of constraint on cutting in those smaller wetlands below 10 acres.
There will be, forgive me, again, I'm back to your sensibility comment. What does that mean? Because there will be no ordinances that pertain to timber harvesting under 10-acre wetlands.
Right, but
It would still be the same option 1, 2, and 3, wouldn't it? 5.19.3, Tom, option 1, 2.
Yeah.
And
Those
3
are,
would be the options that they would lay on top of the resource protection wood lot.
it's
Just like they
right,
would on
exactly.
any wood lot.
yeah, but.
I think that's kind of, I think that's what I'm hearing, but I'm not 100%.
Your comment is correct, Kevin. I was just still being confused when he threw the sub 10-acre part back in there as far as
Well,
that.
no, I just want to know when we're, in quotes, giving that up, the protections as they stand now. I want to know what's left for protection.
Nothing.
You have to be so clear-cut.
You see what I'm saying?
You mean,
If you take shoreline zone or put the state definition of shoreline zone as the 250 foot up from blah, blah, blah,
and RP as well.
whatever, you will have no timber harvest oversight on anything under 10 acres in size.
Okay, but thereafter,
Outside, except for streams and stuff.
what would be allowed for a cut in that scenario where we are giving up the notion of embracing town definitions within the timber harvesting ordinance? What would be left for protections on the smaller wetlands? Would it be option 1, for example, just to take one of these options? Within 75 feet horizontal distance?
No, the answer is nothing. If you keep going back to the definition of that, if you have dropped, the
All active.
definition of shoreline zone is minimized at a 10-acre wetland, then timber statewide, state timber harvest law affects everything else. And that has clear-cut regulations attached to it, it has regeneration language attached to it, and it has no moving of earth language attached to it. So beyond that point, anything under 10 acres with regard to our ordinance and timber harvesting is defined.
Right, and I want to know what a timber harvest would look like pertaining to those wetland areas. I'm reading that within 75 feet horizontal
It doesn't
distance.
apply. None of that applies. You keep going back to that ordinance, but that ordinance is within the shoreline and resource protection zone.
It's just like cutting an acre right out here.
It
Because
could be,
we're
yeah.
not in the shoreline zone,
Yes.
it's just like everywhere's outside.
Those definitions and restrictions attached to within shoreline zone no longer exist because the definition of what shoreline zone is minimized at a 10-acre size.
Right.
So if you looked on the maps, the orange is the 250 zone, so it would be all the other colors are local, not state. And even some of the 250 zones are only 250 because it's forested wetlands, so even some of these would shrink down, but any of the odd color stuffs would definitely disappear. And I think my only real concern was a bad forester and a bad homeowner together, a bad timber guy and a bad homeowner. Clear cut one that is hydric soil or just loomy vegetation, once you cut that out, the heat's gonna get in there, and then the regrowth, and you know more about it than me, is the regrowth going to be a forest coming back in, or some of the wetland vegetation? Because now you've got the heat in there and the sun.
It would still come back as forest. I mean,
Yeah.
again, unless you tell me that you and I know better than state foresters,
Well,
I mean, we're either following statewide standards or we're not. We're either in
Exactly.
compliance with statewide standards or we're not. The blending of the two is where things are coming by this gray area in the middle. So when we, again, what we do where, we rescinded some, we adopted the statewide standards within the RP, and the only thing I came here tonight thinking about was what we're calling the RP in the shoreline zone. So you still have, wetland buffers with regard to like streams, you still have wetland buffers on all of these other wetlands, you still have restrictions on not moving of soil, you still have best management practices, you still have no rutting. But if the town sees fit to say that it needs more than that, then you will simply be doing it completely greater than statewide standards, period. And we have gotten rid of all, again, forgive me for going backwards again, and whether it was intended to be that way or misunderstood to be that way. State harvesting is, it does have ordinances, it does have restrictions, it does have oversight. But if the town is not going to do it by the state definitions and the state standards, then we are completely on our own to bring stuff about from scratch. So the first thing that we have to do is decide, do you take the red pill or the blue pill, or whatever the analogy. And beyond that, it's up to the definitions. You have to answer that question first.
But it goes back to the question Tom was asking you, what would be left? If we change this, we would still have the practice of the state
Yep.
that would be there.
Which are greater than 10 acres, stream side buffers, wetland buffers for wetlands greater than 10 acres, and any of those things that dictate, again, no erosion, best management practices. Those are all within A, statewide standards and Forest Practices Acts.
The local resource protection protected areas could be cut up to, just say 40 square feet per acre.
40 square feet or, well, again, that's on the upper dry definition of a clear cut. So yes,
Correct,
that's
yeah.
a dry ground.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's what forested wetlands in town are, they're actually dry. Some of them are. Some of the forested wetlands are, I suppose.
They're seasonally wet.
Yeah, exactly.
Some can be. I've seen some that the people have said there's never any water there. I mean, it's a depression of some kind, and it's just poor soil and poor vegetation.
Well, again,
It's
the
not
lot
saturated.
that we spoke about had, if you go to the USCS Soil Conservation District, it says, cultivatable soil, wet at seasonable times of year, could be farmland for all I know.
Exactly.
Could be
That's
a
a good
hayfield.
way to look at it.
So whether
Good
or not
rich
it has
soil.
trees on it is kind of irrelevant to what the soils are underneath of it. But when the map was drawn, when the definitions were changed to include smaller than 10-acre wetlands, those wetlands migrated upstream to include seasonally wet soils If you wanted to click on that, you could point a couple of them out if you want to, but again, we're getting pretty specific. So again, to keep things broad, we need to find out what the idea of the planning board and the town is. We brought in statewide standards. The intention at the time was to have us match the definition of what shoreland and resource protection was for the state. And now we seem to be looking backwards, questioning what was brought about then as well.
So the statewide standards were already in the ordinance, they've been there for years.
But we rescinded
We've
the
just-
point one part.
We've got
right.
rid of the local stuff to head us in the direction of compliance.
So I think-
But if we kept everything under 2 acres in size, then there would be very little need. You wouldn't be going towards statewide standards anyway, so it would be all moot.
Correct. Except for you don't need a cable boom skidder.
Right, exactly. But that would be something that would be open to negotiation for, eons to come, I
Exactly.
suppose, yeah. So is having statewide standards a worthy goal? To my answer, to my opinion, yes.
My
Yeah, you
opinion, off the cuff, would be, I think many timber harvesting people are abusing it because they don't know the regulation is there, except for one. 'Cause he
And
knows it's
remember, we still have kept, and this is the question of trying to say, do we have purview? If the chart isn't changed, we still have forester oversight on RP jobs.
I thought it was all statewide standards or nothing.
Nope. If the statewide standards were what you do where. In my feedback from the state, they want to be able to say, if someone is standing out there in Acton, we are measuring X number of feet off of wetland edge for X number of basal area for their enforcement purposes. I am to understand that if a forester is involved in a sale in RP, in that chart still, that we still are in compliance with statewide standards because we haven't changed the actual standard. We have just said,
You need a forester.
you need a forester to do it. So I suppose to answer part of your question, Tom, toward that end, is that if we still have our with a licensed forester in RP comment in there, then the answer is you've got somebody with his license on the line as well.
Right,
For 10 acres and greater.
right.
Well, currently,
I'll give it some thought.
currently it's even smaller than that, but yeah.
So if I have a timber harvesting violation, I can't call the state,
Currently.
Because we're not,
because we're not in compliance, they don't want nothing to do with us.
so I think, as Gavin was saying before, we need to think about it.
Yep.
We need to make a decision at some point which way we want to go, and then figure out how we're going to do that. So maybe we just kind of go at this point and put it back on the agenda.
Keep it on as old business.
As we go along. But I mean, I think it's something that we all need to think about.
And we can do some field trips on some of them, if the board feels.
Yeah. I mean, again, I would like to know what we thought we brought in last time.
I thought we
Because we all
We
kind
were
of
just
said-
getting rid of extra language, we didn't bring anything in.
Yeah.
Well, we-
Verbiage was already in the ordinance.
Well, I do agree, for
Yeah.
sure. But we did have the question of, and you specifically had asked the question, what happens for protection on wetlands that are smaller than whatever the limit is set? And we did get into that discussion before it was brought up. So, again, the answer to your question is, yes, exactly, you're right. But I would like to know, just to figure out whether we really have, grounds to move forward farther. Again, what did we think we did last time?
My opinion of what we thought we did, we got rid of the town stuff,
And brought us into,
the prescriptive stuff, and left the performance-based in there, but I wasn't under the impression that we were going to be able to cut the local resource and shoreline zone unregulated.
But then you knew that we also would not be within statewide standards for doing so,
To think the
right?
whole thing through,
But that was the goal.
was to go towards
It was the
statewide
goal.
standards.
And we're moving that way.
But unless you're 100%, yeah, I mean, you could be 99% and you're still not there.
Well, look what just happened the other year on Grady's Lake, and you weren't in conformance with the state, but you had the issue, you called the state, and they said, oh, that's a 10-acre or larger water body. They came, looked at it, gave you advice. It's not like they'd be like, oh, see you later. If there was somebody doing these things on the 10-acre and greater wetlands. I think that's a scare tactic. I think the state would still come down if we had a serious issue, so.
They don't return my calls.
Well, on that particular instance that I remember.
They did.
They did come down on that particular.
But we hadn't
instance, so.
gone through those, you know,
Yeah, that was early enough, that was before the
Yeah,
article.
They're
That's before
digging in
town
a lot
meeting.
tighter now. And we actually went statewide standards a while ago, and then we got kicked out and back in, and it takes months for us to get notification of where we're at, but it's pretty clear now.
Stephen, just to recap quickly, what would happen to R4? What do you propose would happen to that? Is that?
Well, if you stuck with again, the way I'm understanding it, you can still have forester oversight on timber harvest inside of RP. That's why I was saying if you got rid of the idea of using the definition of what RP is, or made sure that it was specific to timber harvesting only. I just don't want the verbiage to be crossed between uses, that's all.
So that might have to be clarified with the phrase of.
Yeah, that's kind of like a micro part of this
Yep.
scenario. We definitely have to get the macro stuff first.
Yeah.
R4 is on page 18 if you're looking.
That's the chart, right? It's the R4
Oh,
forest.
just the note, it's not actually.
It's a footnote, yeah.
Right.
And the footnote says, within RP, a forester will be needed, or a conditional use to the,
Right.
you either come in front of the planning board for a conditional use permit to work in these areas, or you have a forester whose license is involved supervising the sale.
Okay. And there's nothing in the chart, where is it addressed in the chart itself in terms of?
Well, is that what you're looking, Ken just brought, are you looking at what Ken brought up?
Oh,
or-
yeah, timber
Okay.
harvesting commercial.
So R4 is just forester is required in this district, and this district. And part of that is for the delineation of what the buffer, distances are, what the identification of the soils are, and that sort of thing. So again, to my understanding, we still are allowed to have forester supervision required. That way Ken can talk the same language with the logger, with the forester supervising the RP, the sale and the RP. You move forward from there.
So you don't see us losing that, the sense behind that R4, essentially? If
Well,
we-
again, that's a whole separate discussion, but no, I don't.
Right.
I'm fine with leaving it there. I'm a forester. All of my sales have foresters involved in them.
But that doesn't
But,
get us at cross purposes with the state. If-
No, I do not, the way I understand it, again, is it's the performance-based standards,
Yeah.
which are what determines what you cut where, specific, again, I was told by the state, that is why we did not use the definition of shoreland zone. We did not use resource protection in the new verbiage that we brought in, because we don't want York, we don't want Acton, we don't want, South Berwick to make up their own definition of what RP is, and all of a sudden, that's a backdoor approach to changing the timber harvest ordinances on this acre of ground. So they didn't use the term, they just simply defined it as inside of 250 from this, 75 from that.
To be continued at our next meeting, taking this subject up, could you, somehow or other, so it's clear to us what we might be asked that we're giving up. I'd like to know what protections we would be left with, which would have some bearing on, the quality of, the viability of these smaller wetlands once we threw the protection out by adopting state definitions, essentially. What would be allowable in those areas? I can read option 1, and it looks like there's except in a clear-cut situation, there are some, there wouldn't be any because.
That would be in the state
Right.
RP. So in the local RP, it would be 40 square feet of basin area per acre,
Yeah.
size of the table.
What was that part?
Size of the table, 4 by 10, 40 square feet.
Oh, that's, yeah, but I'm just saying that's, unless you know what a basal area is out there, that's,
Yeah.
I don't know what that would mean to anybody.
Only you.
Okay, only me, Ken, only me.
Anybody else? All right, so go back again, we're thinking about it, we'll bring it back up, and, decide which direction we want to go, and then we'll go forward from that point, deciding how we want to handle that.
It might help, though, if Ken and Steve were to have one more session together and maybe bring us a sample of what would achieve this goal of separating Acton's verbiage on RP areas from the states.
Well, I think we're in agreement on that. The question is if we're backtracking, saying if we do or do not want to do that.
Yeah, I just want to see where we would make the change, so it's clearly understood and go from there. I understand what you're driving at, and I guess we just have to work on it.
I would personally just drop the shoreline and resource names from the title of the article. That way you have its definition right there within its body. And you're just not calling it by name. That way there's no confusion when Ken or I or some future forester or code officer starts to connect timber harvesting with other RP projects.
Well, I would think for the woodland owner of the land, we should make it as clear as we can at the outset that there is a parsing, if you will, or a separation of the definitions for timber harvesting versus residential or building development. You can't use those terms interchangeably with the state and Acton definitions. They have different outcomes.
I'm in agreement with you in practice. Well, in principle, what I'm saying is in practice, when you start throwing a name around, and you say this one is a capital S and this one is a small s, or whatever it is that you have, we're going to start, commission start putting it one way or the other. If it's not needed to be in there by definition, I would just use its actual definition, not my name. But again, so we're beyond that point, right? So, I mean, to be honest, I think probably if this is going to continue to go back toward what can I do where on forested land within the town, as a forester working within the town, as a forester working for the town, the first thing that I would do would be to just put me out in the field and put you out in the field. Truthfully. We can go back and we can talk about theory all day long, but if every time we go to town meeting or every time we draft new information, there is question about what can I do where on this acre, then the best thing for me to do is to put you on that acre and have you tell me, because I'm getting differing goals from you guys, this versus what I understood we were shooting for versus now what we have drafted. So if we get out there and I say, would you see this as a problem if this is this and this was a state guideline here versus a town guideline, then you can all make your own decisions on whether or not you see fit that that's a problem or it's not. But this going backwards kind of thing is not productive, and we'll be another year into this process and still be second guessing ourselves from a year ago.
We may be another year regardless,
Sure.
you know.
Yep. But until I put you on the ground and say, would this be a problem? I'm seeing that you're going to continue asking questions back at the beginning of this process.
No, I would just, I'd go back to what my suggestion would be as to cleanly handle this, would be right in that first line of 519, i.e. delineate right there, let the reader know that there is a state definition of RP and there is an Acton definition, and we're abiding by, in all timber harvesting operations, the state definitions of those two areas.
Yep.
For timber harvesting.
But that's what I came in here to propose tonight, but now we're talking about sub 10 acre stuff again.
No, we just want to know what the impact of doing that change, what are we giving up there in a sense of, from an ecological sense if you want. Are we losing something in terms of leaning toward number one, giving the landowner the rights to do what he wants with his land versus the notion of maintaining the viability of some of these wetlands might be an important community value.
Yeah, but you don't change the definition until you
Right.
tell me whether or not you want to do it there or not.
I guess all I can say is I'd be happy.
We're beating a dead horse, I apologize, we need to move forward, but I'm here for whatever field work and or language we need to have drafted, but like I said, I see two issues. I see one, changing the language in order to move forward towards statewide standards, and that's the verbiage that you're talking about,
Yeah.
that I would agree to change towards. And we have the question of whether or not we should or we shouldn't, which is whether or not you get to or do not get to govern under 10-acre wetlands.
For timber harvest.
For timber harvesting, yeah, sorry.
I, personally, it troubles me that we would be giving up some protections, but I understand very clearly that what is in the balance is property rights here in a very real sense. And that I think the board members of the community need to understand what we're horse trading. Not that we wouldn't go along with your proposal, but what does it leave us for protections that were quite widely and strongly embraced for building development, residential development, commercial development, as vis-a-vis those small developments?
That's a lot of words for what I think I just put out there. If I put you on the face of the earth and you say, what can I do here if we are governed by town standards as they currently stand?
No,
Or not?
I completely understand
Okay.
that line of reasoning.
Well, we could set a date for a sidewalk if you
Yeah,
want,
yeah,
that's what you're pushing for, I don't know, I mean. See what
I
people,
mean,
members of
I
the
would
board
like to do
think.
that too. However, I'm not in a position to understand a kind of a place that Steve would show us. I mean, you could show us a place that would make it look exactly like you want us to see it.
With all due respect,
I mean,
you're gonna have to put faith in somebody.
I mean, that's what, I mean, I'm not.
You're the planning board,
I don't
I'm
know
not
if I'm-
making your decisions for you.
I'm not sure I'm ready to make that decision as to when you do a sidewalk until I have a little information about how we decide what we want to see.
Okay, well, I guess the punchline would be, is if I forward it to Brenda, or you look it up specifically with Ken, I mean, it is we have the statewide standards for within RP in our ordinance, that's what it is. The only other thing that would govern timber harvesting in this state is the state timber harvest ordinances. I can go online, I can look them up, I can give you a link and send it to Brenda, and she can shoot it out to all of you. Are you going to understand what 40 square feet of this is, or 450 stems per acre is of that, whether you deem that to be enough or not enough, or whatever?
Yeah.
I just don't want it to get no pun intended, muddied along the way, that information is going, if it's in principle a problem, then me giving you massive amounts of information without showing you on the face of the earth is just gonna make it tougher to understand.
Are you talking verbiage or physically being on the ground and not really knowing you're an RP, but he's just bringing us to a forest in the middle of nowhere?
I mean, Ken has to agree. It's not like I'm gonna take you on top of a sand pit and say,
This is RP. That's how I took it.
I mean,
And they'd leave us there.
I mean, it's,
How would my place work for you?
Oh, you're in resource protection, there's no getting out of that one.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, I'm
It's
small
temporary.
resource protection area, right? I'm over 10 acres?
He's in the real one, isn't he?
I think.
I'm in the-
you could-
You're in the real world.
I think you got the.
No, well,
Oh,
you've got some local on there too, because your house was able to be built, then the local came over and expanded it. I think you've got a lot of forest.
if you're looking for objectivity, how about I give you this? Why don't you pick the site?
Well, that's what I'm trying to.
Yeah.
I'll just take the words out.
But I think the key is the forested wetlands.
Yeah.
To me.
I think it's what he's trying to say.
There's other places who would want to.
Maybe it'd be helpful to see both, like a forested wetland where one is very much dry and you wouldn't, you're.
Come to my house and I'll show you where my
And then-
feet can go down 4 inches, and I'm pretty sure it's wetland.
And then another spot where
Is
it's,
it on the map?
I'm on Square Pond.
I mean, again, there are places in town that don't show as wetlands that are, and there are places that do show that aren't, so that's
It's
what I'm
mostly something
saying.
about education, right?
Yeah.
So
I think it was a
my cat and I.
satellite
didn't
flyover
know.
from
Yeah, probably so.
National Wetlands.
Yeah, yeah.
Mapping.
The ducks are a dead giveaway.
So-
Sorry.
The ducks do it.
Get out of here.
So can we then legitimately come up with a place to look at? And I mean,
You know, it's pertinent to the question, nice, not too
Yeah,
extreme in one direction or another.
As the newest person in here, forgive me, but I'm thinking what we need is a Reader's Digest version of the last hour. Are we here to change verbiage? One.
To bring into compliance or, yep.
One. Two, will that bring us into compliance? Three, if the state says nothing about 10 acres or less, and we're talking about timber harvesting, is there any protection at all from either foresters, timber people, or the town of Acton? Or the loggers? Is there any protection? 3 questions. Not, I mean, I had 2 ticks on me after going out to the wedding barn last week, so I'm not, I will dress better next week and put more poison on, but,
Well, the answer is
what's this
yes.
gonna show?
The answer is yes, but you have not seen on the face of the earth what the statewide minimum standards are for general purpose dry area harvesting is what I'm understanding you to say.
No, I didn't say that at all. I said 3 things.